Hello everyone, I'm going to be reading Stephenie Meyer's book Eclipse today. For more information, check out the tab. Otherwise, I'm about to start reading right now. Chapter 1, Ultimatum. Bella, I don't know why you're making Charlie carry notes to Billy like we're in second grade. If I wanted to talk to you, I would answer the... crosses out. You can make the choice here, okay? You can't have it both ways when... crosses it out. What part of mortal enemies is too complicated? Look, I know I'm being a jerk, but there's just no way around... crosses it out. We can't be friends when you're spending all your time with a bunch of... crosses it out. It just makes it worse when I think about you too much, so don't write anymore. Crosses it out. Yeah, I miss you too. A lot. Doesn't change anything. Sorry, Jacob. I ran my fingers across the page, feeling the dents where he had pressed the pen to the paper so hard that it had nearly broken through. I could hear pictures of him writing this, scrawling the angry letters in his rough handwriting, slashing through line after line when the words came out wrong, maybe even snapping the pen in his too big hand. That would explain the ink splatters. I could imagine the frustration pulling his black eyebrows together and crumbling his forehead. If I'd just been there, I might have laughed. Don't give yourself a brain hemorrhage, Jacob, I would have told him. Just spit it out. Laughing was the last thing I felt like doing now, as I reread the words I'd already memorized. His answer to my pleading note, passed from Charlie to Billy to him, just like second grade, as he pointed out, was no surprise. I know the essence of what it would say before I opened it. What was surprising was how much each crossed out line wounded me, as if the points of the letters had cutting edges. More than that, behind each angry beginning lurked a vast pool of hurt. Jacob's pain cut me deeper than my own. While I was pondering this, I caught the unmistakable scent of smoking burner rising from the kitchen in another house. The fact that someone besides myself was cooking might not be a cause for panicking. I shoved the wrinkled paper into my back pocket and ran, making it downstairs in the nick of time. The jar of spaghetti sauce Charlie tucked in the microwave was only its first revolution when I yanked the door open and pulled it out. What did I do wrong? Charlie demanded. You're supposed to take the lid off first, Dad. Metal's bad for microwaves. I swiftly removed the lid as I spoke, poured half the sauce into a bowl, and then put the bowl inside the microwave, and the jar back into the fridge. I fixed the time and pressed start. Charlie watched the adjustments with pursed lips. Did I get the noodles right? I looked in the pan on the stove, the source of the smell that had alerted me. Stirring helps, I said mildly. I found a spoon and tried to declump the mushy hunk that was scalded to the bottom. Charlie sighed. So, what's all this about? I asked him. He folded his arms across his chest and glared out the back window into the sheeting rain. Don't know what you're talking about, he grumbled. I was mystified. Charlie? Cooking? And what was with the surly attitude? Edward wasn't here yet. Usually my dad reserved this kind of behavior for my boyfriend's benefit, doing his best to illustrate the theme of unwelcome. With every word and posture. Charlie's efforts were unnecessary. Edward knew exactly what my dad was thinking without the show. The word boyfriend had me chewing on the inside of my cheek with a familiar tension while I stirred. It wasn't the right word, not at all. I needed something more expressive of eternal commitment, but words like destiny and fate sounded hokey when you used them in a casual conversation. Edward had another word in mind, and that word was the source of the tension I felt. It put my teeth on edge just to think of it myself. Fiancé? I shuddered away from the thought. Did I miss something? Since when do you make dinner? I asked Charlie. The pasta lump bobbed in the boiling water as I poked it. Or tried to make dinner, I should say. Charlie shrugged. There is no law that says I can't cook in my own house. You would know, I replied, grinning as I awed the badge pinned to his leather jacket. Ha, good one. He shrugged out the jacket as if my glance had reminded him he still had it on, and hung it on the peg reserved for his gear. His gun belt was already slung in place. He hadn't felt the need to wear wear that to the station for a few weeks. There had been no more disturbing experiences to trouble the small town folks of Forks, Washington. No more sightings of the giant, mysterious wolves in every rainy woods. I prodded the noodles in silence, guessing that Charlie would get around to talking about whatever was bothering him in his own time. My dad was not a man of many words, and the effort he had put into trying to orchestrate a sit-down dinner which made it clear there were uncharacteristic number of words on his mind. I glanced at the clock routinely, something I did every few minutes around this time. Less than half an hour to go now. Afternoons were the hardest part of my day. Ever since my former best friend and werewolf, Jacob Black, had informed on me about the motorcycle I've been riding on the sly, a betrayal he had devised in order to get me grounded so that I couldn't spend time with my boyfriend and vampire, Edward Cullen. Edward had been allowed to see me only 7 till 9:30 p.m., always inside the confines of my home and under the supervision of my dad's unfailing crabby glare. This was an escalation from the previous, slightly less stringent grounding that I'd earned an unexplained 3-day disappearance and 1 episode of cliff diving. Of course, I still saw Edward at school because there wasn't anything Charlie could do about that. And then Edward spent most of his nights in my room, too. But Charlie wasn't precisely aware of that. Edward's ability to climb easily and silently through my second-story window was almost as useful as the ability to read Charlie's mind. Though the afternoon was the only time I spent away from Edward, it was enough to make me restless, and the hours always dragged. Still, I endured my punishment without complaining, because for one thing, I knew I'd earned it, and for another, because I couldn't bear to hurt my dad by moving out now, when a much more permanent separation hovered, invisible to Charlie, so close on my horizon. I don't know why you read the news, Dad. It only ticks you off. He ignored me, grumbling at the paper at his hands. This is why everyone wants to live in a small town. Ridiculous. What have big cities done wrong now? Seattle's making a run for murder capital of the country. 5 unsolved homicides in the last 2 weeks. Can you imagine living like that? I think Phoenix is actually higher up on the homicide list, Dad. I have lived like that. And I never come across to being a murder victim until after I moved to his safe little town. In fact, I was still on several hit lists. The spoon shook in my hand, making the water tremble. Well, you couldn't pay me enough, Charlie said. I gave up on my saving dinner and settled for serving it. I had to use a steak knife to cut portions of spaghetti for Charlie and then myself, while he watched me sheepishly with a sheepish expression. Charlie coated his helping with sauce and dug in. I disguised my own clumps as well as I could and followed his example without much enthusiasm. We ate in silence for a moment. Charlie was still scanning the news, so I picked up a much-abused copy of Wuthering Heights from where I'd left it this morning at breakfast and tried to lose myself in Turn of the Century England while I waited for him to start talking. I was just to the part where Heathcliff returns with Charlie, cleared his throat, and threw the papers to the floor. You're right, Charlie said. I did have a reason for doing this. He waved his forks at the gluey spread. I wanted to talk to you. I laid the book aside. The binding was so destroyed that it slumped flat on the table. You could have just asked. He nodded, his eyebrows pulling together. Yeah, I'll remember that next time. I thought taking dinner off your hands would soften you up. I laughed. It worked. Your cooking skills have me soft as marshmallow. What do you need, Dad? Well, it's about Jacob. I felt my face harden. What about him? I asked through stiff lips. Easy bells. I know you're still upset that he told on you, but it was the right thing. He was being responsible. Responsible? I repeated, scratchingly, rolling my eyes. Right. So what about Jacob? The careless question repeated inside my head. Anything but trivial. What about Jacob? What was I going to do about him? My former best friend, who was now what? My enemy? I cringed. Charlie's face was suddenly wary. Don't get mad at me, okay? Mad? Well, it's about Edward, too. My eyes narrowed. Charlie's voice got gruffer. I let him in the house, don't I? You do, I admitted. For brief periods of time, of course, you might